Okay, hello and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. My name is Deepa and I'll be the moderator for today. In this webinar, we'll be looking at how to improve demand forecasting and resource capacity planning strategies, mainly for consulting projects. So with me, I have Akash Gupta, and he will be the speaker for today. Akash is the subject matter expert of enterprise resource management here at Saviom. He has been with Saviom since 2012 and is involved in devising approaches and methods that can be adopted by companies to improve their resource planning and scheduling processes. Before I hand it over to Akash, we also have we are offering a free one-on-one consultancy with our resource management experts as a part of this webinar. So, after this webinar, if you have any questions, please write to us and we'll be happy to book a slot with one of our experts. And yeah, over to you, Akash.
Thank you, Deepa. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so today what we're going to be going through demand forecasting and capacity planning, specifically more focused and targeted towards your consulting and professional services firms. Now, we've done webinars before in a similar area, and it was more specific towards engineering and construction. Now, what we're doing today is a bit more focused with professional services firms. These are the type of companies we come across a lot, and when it comes to resource management and companies that have large projects that they deal with. So we thought we would kind of do a very specific approach towards demand forecasting and capacity planning for them. Now, as you must have seen, the title is of our webinar is 10% more projects with 10% less resources. I can promise you that this is not just a clickbait title that we've created. There is, there is a lot of, substance to that, and we don't make that claim lightly. That is something that we've really kind of helped with numerous companies that we've worked with, and we talk about exactly, the core benefits of demand forecasting and capacity planning in your overall industry. So, once you kind of implement these and really have a very solid structure of them within your company, you can essentially kind of get that type of output that we're promising. And as Deepa mentioned in that consultation, we really like to help out and kind of go into the specifics because we understand that each company works in a very different way. Now, just a bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering today. So today, I guess, is more of, I'd say, a bit more of an introductory session into this space. So the first part, we're just going to do a bit of a refresher on the core concepts that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the, demand forecasting and resource capacity planning within the context of resource management. So we're just going to kind of go through some of those conceptual discussions over there. Well, the second one is then going into the benefits of this. So, doing more projects with less resources is a pretty big claim. But we talk about the benefits that you get out of it and how that kind of results in kind of achieving those type of outcomes that most companies look for. And the final one, and the one that we're going to spend probably the most time on, is just kind of going through some tips and actionable steps that you can take towards implementing, just at least the basics, and just start kind of implementing it within your company. And then we kind of go through, and all of this is kind of very much backed up with our years of experience in this space. So fantastic. So I'll jump right into it. Now, first definition I always like to jump into is resource management. Now, resource management it sounds like a very generic term, but this concept of demand forecasting, capacity planning, we talk under the broader concept of resource management. Now, by resource management, we talk about it's essentially the efficient and effective deployment and allocation of a company's resources when they're needed. So this is essentially, just essentially planning and allocating your staff based on different work that you have coming up, whether it is project or non-project work. And I said staff, but I actually mean resources. So, it doesn't just have to be your human resources or staff. This can include things like, non-human resources like computers or vehicles and everything. But specifically for the consulting professional services space, obviously they're dealing with different types of staff, whether it be permanents or contractors and so on. Now, one thing I'd like to note, and I'm sure is resource management. We do not talk about HR. We're not talking about this in the concept of HR. This is under the concept of more in the project management PMO space. And everything that we talk about, it kind of covers to really help out with your project output and delivery. Now, the two concepts that we're going to be really going into the flesh of is demand forecasting and resource capacity planning. Now, demand forecasting, what we talk about that is essentially we're talking about the understanding the work and the demand side of things. Understanding what work that you have coming up, what the nature of the work is, the amount of work that you have coming up. And by the nature of the work, we talk about project and non-project related work. So it's not just necessarily all the client-related project work that you might have coming on. We also include things like your training, your admin work, your support work, things that don't really work under that project structure, but then need to be considered when you are essentially scheduling your staff and when you are allocating different staff based on the work that you have. Now, quite closely pegged to that, is your resource capacity planning, right? Capacity planning covers the other side of things. That's the supply side of things. If you want to talk about it in a very, I guess, in an economic point of view. So by supply side, we're talking about the staff and your resources that can essentially take on this work, that can take on this demand or the amount of work that's going to be coming up. Now, your capacity planning will essentially be, formed around the work that's there. So, the number of staff you need, that's obviously the first thing that you need to consider. Things like, the type of skills that these resources need. I've summed it up very, in about one sentence in the capacity planning side. The resource capacity planning, essentially, it allows you to design your team as to the exact commitment levels you foresee. I really like that line. That essentially covers, the whole component of it. You design it in the exact way that you require. You're not having too many people. You're not having, too little people. You have the exact amount, so you're not really spending too much, or you're not overworking your current staff. But anyway, we'll jump into that. So that covers kind of like the core concept of it. Now, what the benefit of this? Well, what is the benefit of essentially demand forecasting and capacity planning? We really, conceptually, they sound great, but what are the benefits that you can really achieve? The three easiest ways to kind of look at it is that you can diversify, optimize, and retain your skilled or your resources that you have. Those are the three ones that I always rely on, and I think those are the core benefits in any way. Now, going into the detail of it, when I say diversify, with diversification, especially in professional services firms, you're required to have a diversity of resources. And by diversity, I mean whether it be by your skills, whether it be by people's location, whether it be by their resource type as well. You have, the proper mix of full-timers and contractors and so on. So, there's a few points that I like to kind of point out in this one. First one is, from diversity, you have the exact number of people you need. I think that's the first and crux of things. You have the exact number of people you need that can take on this future work that's there. So, that's the first one. And the second one, which then kind of goes a bit more into the diversity side, is what type of resources do you need? Is this, are we talking about, do you want a proper mix of more full-timers to contractors? Or if your work is a bit more ad hoc in nature, then obviously you'll need a stronger mix of contractors that are there. Or if you're looking to really reduce costs, then in that case, you want to have a few more full-timers and part-timers, so you're not paying that premium for your contractors. So obviously that diversity, once you kind of pinpoint your demand forecasting, capacity planning, that diversity becomes a lot more set, and you can kind of determine that how you want. Second one is in terms of your skills and roles as well. How much do you require to really train them and diversify your certain skill sets that you have. And then, so yeah, that's essentially the diversity one. I don't want to jump into it too much. Second one is optimizing your resources. That's the second core benefit, and that's your probably your immediate, I'd say, short to medium term benefits of this. Diversification, you kind of start to see the results of that only after, I'd say, about 12 months or so of if you do diligently kind of go through the process of capacity planning and demand forecasting. But optimizing your resources is probably the immediate benefits that one of the immediate benefits that you see. But you can kind of, you know, ensure immediately that your staff is not overworked. The moment you kind of, in your next project cycle, see the amount of work that you have coming up and the non-project related work that you have coming up, you can immediately then, you know, optimize and make sure that you don't have too many resources there for a minimal amount of work, or vice versa. You don't have too much work for, too much work for less resources. You're not under or overutilizing them in any way. And obviously, the results of that kind of speak for themselves. Obviously, when you're overworking your staff, productivity, quality really dramatically decreases, and vice versa. If you have, you know, too little work, you're not motivating your staff enough, and retaining them becomes a lot more difficult as well. So, you know, it essentially allows you to optimize your resources, allows you to optimize your work evenly as well, and then it really improves your bottom line ROI too. Now, the third one is another long-term, I guess I should have structured it a bit more in the short-term, the long-term, you know, benefits of it, but retaining your skilled resources. Now, this for me, I think is one of the core benefits of you know, implementing these methodologies. You know, the moment that, you know, you can see and foresee and have a pretty good idea of how this cycle works, because at the end of the day, regardless of whichever company or whatever the work structure is, there is a certain cycle that most companies go throughout the year for the work that they come in, you know. Obviously during financial year, for a lot of professional services, especially a bit more of the financial professional services, will obviously see a peak in demand, and you know, in that time you can kind of see the trends of that and accordingly determine the capacity and staff that you have for that period. The moment you pick up on those trends, I'd say after, like, you know, 12 to 24 months, you then become very, very good at, like, kind of making sure you retain the skilled staff you need. Now, for example, you know, you make sure that you firstly hire correctly. You know, you have the exact type of, you know, number of contractors you need, the exact type of skill set of people that you require as well. It allows you to train right as well. Like, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, if you don't want to have a high proportion of contractors, you can make sure that you have, you know, you can train your staff up well beforehand for any of the work that might be coming up in the coming, you know, in the coming months or so. And then finally, then once you've kind of done both of those, then you're probably going to be, you'll be sticking with a well-retained group of resources. You know, they're going to be like, you know, you'll have a proper mix of staff that you can very much rely on. You know the skills, you know their experience, and then you can utilize them to the best of their ability too. So that's the third one there. Now, I guess quickly kind of going back, recapping what I'm doing before I go into the tips part and the major second part of today's presentation. You know, the benefits of this is essentially, you know, firstly, it helps you stay lean. You know, you're not, you know, you're kind of acting as per the demand that's there. You're not making kind of, you know, decisions in the dark. You're making sure that the work you take on is dependent on, you know, the amount that you can build your capacity to, and then your capacity is obviously built around that work. You're not kind of, you know, making these decisions just off the whim or, you know, estimating too much. You're really making scientific decisions when it comes to this. You're a lot more accurate in that. Doing that, you stay lean. You know, your ROI will see an organic boost as well, and this is the best part, because essentially you're not investing in a lot of new, you know, resources or anything like that. You're essentially just investing in the process. You know, you're investing in your internal process. You're looking at things in a lot more of an analytical point of view, and that automatically, you know, increases the level of output, the level of quality, essentially the level of you know, the level of your bottom line for a company, and that's, I think, highly, you know, highly valuable for any organization, whether they're in the professional services space or any other industry as well. Fantastic. Now, let me just get a sip of water. I'm just going to, give me 1 second. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the tips and you know, kind of how to really perfect these different areas. Now, demand forecasting, capacity planning, they do look at very different angles of the company, and I'm going to kind of talk about some of the tips that you can kind of improve both sides, and then the third component will essentially be kind of merging the two and looking at how you can improve the two from there. So the core benefit, I'd say, for both demand forecasting and you'll see in capacity planning as well, is visibility. Visibility is absolutely core for everything that you do. When I talk about visibility, we're firstly talking about, wanting to first see all the different types of work. Now, I've really specified that several times. Let me just get to the, hold on. So when I talk about visibility, I'm talking about, just having views of all different types of work that's there. So right now, if you have a look at my Gantt chart that I've built for myself and for my team, you can see that I have all the staff available, meaning, or I can see all the staff that are there, but more importantly, on the demand forecasting side, I can see all the work that's there. And that includes your project work, and that's, your client-related work or so on, or then that also includes your non-project related work as well. So, I have things like, I guess, I can go into a separate list to kind of show the difference between the two, but what I've done over here is color-coded them. I've in a very different way color-coded the different project types, so I know the type of work I'm dealing with without having to quickly, or without having to in detail look at the type of, the name of the projects or anything like that. But if you want a bit more of a list or a bit of a table of this stuff, I also have a separate kind of, hold on. I also have, a project list over here where I can see all the different benefits of the different work that I have. So, I've broken it down in a very, very simple format. I've just called some the external projects, and those are all my, client-related projects I have. Then there's the internal projects as well. These might be like, internal, that just might be internally related to my company, but then things like infrastructure setup, admin work. I've also included training as well, and then even vacation. So all different type of works, all different type of things that could kind of occupy my resource pool is all included over here. And you can also then see how it was represented in the Gantt chart, the different colors that each of them represent. And the color coding is obviously dependent on each company, but I highly recommend to kind of have a clear differentiation, especially between your external and your project related work and the non-project related work, because then you can kind of determine the importance of the work that you have coming up. Second thing that I then also like to focus on is then, the pipeline projects as well. So, pipeline projects is something that a lot of companies end up kind of putting a bit more on a back burner. It's very easy to do that because obviously it's not guaranteed that you're going to be getting that work. So it's not always, directly in your sight. So pipeline projects, you want to make sure that you have at least a tentative plan of the type of staff that you have coming up. One thing that we do over here in Saviom is to make sure that we put like a bit of probability, a matrix for the probability that those projects are going to go through. What are the chances? Is it going to be a 60% chance? Are we 90% there? But all we are waiting for is the PO and invoice. Based on that, then you can accordingly determine how much do you want to include your pipeline projects into the whole system of things. I highly recommend to include anyway, when the guarantee is about 60% or more, you need to guarantee it as well. Or the second metric to then also measure by is also determining the size of it. Let's say even if there's there's a low chance that a project is going to go through, but then it requires at least about 50 to 60% of your workforce to be placed on this, you need to consider that as well. It's important to kind of have an entire angle and an entire visibility of all of those different components that are there. Another thing is to then definitely look at past trends. I think that's a fairly given one, but then you'd be surprised how little people kind of have a look at that. I understand year by year trends kind of can change. But not everything changes, right? There's different seasons throughout for professional services firms. Obviously, during financial year, things get very busy, but then, throughout Christmas and towards the holiday period, those two can kind of be your pegs for exactly how you're going to determine the fast period and the slow period. And from there, if you look at about 5 years of your data of how work and how your project work has been determined, that is actually a very good indicator of seeing exactly, when the busy periods are and when the slow periods are as well. I'd say give, I guess, a bit of flexibility of the more ad hoc type of work as well, because I understand that, you know, the ad hoc nature of a lot of projects, you know, new projects can come in every single year, but there is a good portion, I'd say up to 50 to 60% of this schedule will remain the same year on year, and you should take full advantage of that as well. Another given one is involving all different stakeholders. Usually, you know, it's important to, you know, have a majority of people within your PMO, or at least the majority of the people that make the project management decisions, if you don't have, let's say, a dedicated PMO, to involve them in that process. Especially your higher level executives. You know, sometimes they don't step into things like this, but it is sometimes important to kind of show them the work structure that we have, or the work structure that you have coming up, and what type of you know, the type of staff that you might require for that work coming up, and you know, they can give a bit of insight into it as well. So a bit more of a holistic view from them. Second one that we then go to is your resource capacity planning. Now, the second side, so this is more about focusing towards your staff. Same thing, visibility. Visibility is key. When we talk about staff, we're not just talking about, you know, what group they're in, or what division they're in, or what team they're in. You know, there's at least, you know, there could be up to about 15 to 20 criteria. We work with some professional services firms that I would say have about 20 to 25 criteria that they require to kind of consider when it comes to capacity planning. When I talk about that, you know, I have a specific structure for my resources, and I keep a very detailed set of information about each of them. So let's say I go into them, you know, for Bruce Williams over here. Now, Bruce, you know, I have all the information I require of Bruce, all the way from his resource type, you know, so, you know, the thing like, you know, is he a consultant or so on, but the bigger one is to kind of really figure out, like, you know, the different more nitty-gritty components of him as well. So, like, you know, what is Bruce's role? What role can he act as? What are the set of skills that he has as well? You know, those two can be, you know, considered. Yeah, look, every company, you know, records roles. They record competencies as well. But in terms of the more sideline stuff, like, you know, looking at the different type of roles. Each person can sometimes act as multiple different roles. Bruce over here can act as a consultant, but he can also act as a project manager too. It's important to have full visibility of that and to kind of utilize all different type of roles he can act as. Same with skills. Skills, we can sometimes just only focus on the industry side of things. You know, you want to sometimes focus on all the other components. You know, what are his qualifications? Does he have management related skills as well? You know, even things like if you are dealing on an international basis, what are his language skills? What are his certifications that he might have that might be relevant to kind of determine the skill set that we have too? And as you can see, I then also want to consider things like your charge out rate and cost rate too. Now, it's important, especially when it comes to, you know, when you are sending out a group of resources out to different clients, you want to determine the charge out rate and cost rate based on your work that you have coming up. Now, you know, kind of relating the two, if you have a lot of project work coming up, then definitely you want to then take on more, you know, client-related work so you can increase the amount of revenue that's coming up. But if you see that, you know, the cost rate is a bit much and you need to spend more time, you know, to kind of reduce that, you can then make those decisions as well. So both of those components should be considered for each of your resources as well, and then you can accordingly then generate the right reports. Now, the final one is in terms of more of a measurement tip that I like to give is kind of like, you know, looking at and measuring your capacity, not always just by the number of people you have, but sometimes measuring by FTE. Now, FTE, I think, is probably the most, like, you know, I'd say one of the most valuable ways to kind of measure your staff pool. Just, you know, a recap for anyone who is not familiar with the term, FTE is your full-time equivalents, where you kind of measure each staff based on their work week. So obviously, if someone's working full-time, they'll equal to 1 FTE. If they're working, let's say, part-time at only half, you know, let's say 2.5 days in the week, then they'll be equivalent of 0.5 FTE and so on. So, you know, the moment you do that, you kind of, and you kind of add the number of FTEs you have, you kind of have a lot more of an accurate view of all your staff. And the better thing, and this will logically go to the next part, is that once you measure FTE, you can also measure the work that you have coming up in FTE as well, and measuring the two and comparing the two becomes a lot easier. Now, the second one is then obviously then tracking demand and capacity simultaneously. You know, it's important, obviously, you know, looking at them individually doesn't really help much. The moment that you are comparing the two and measuring them on a very constant, regular basis is where you get your best benefits. There's two components of this that I like to focus on. The first one is obviously, you know, directly measuring just the amount of time and effort and output that the company is, you know, that they're putting in. You know, so this is the capacity versus demand report that we have. You know, you can directly compare, you know, in FTE the amount of capacity and demand. So by capacity, we're talking about the staff pool and the resources that we have, and the demand is in essentially in terms of the work that we have that's coming up. So, you know, in a span of, and I've opened this information up from September to October, so for the next 2 months, you can see that the capacity I have, or the number of the size of my resource pool is 13.52 FTE, and my demand is just for 4.37 FTE. So I directly, with two very, very different components, one is work, one is resources, I can have a very easy direct comparison and see that, you know, my capacity is a lot larger than my demand. You know, I have a lot more. I have an availability of 9.15 FTE, so 9.15 of my resources won't have, you know, sufficient work for the coming time. So, you know, immediately just by looking at these two metrics, I can have a bit of an idea that I'm going to have to either increase or, like, you know, take on more projects that I might have coming into the pipeline, or maybe I might have to contract my my capacity, so I'm not, you know, spending 9 resources more worth. You know, and those are the type of decisions you can make. Obviously, for 2 months, those are very rash decisions to make. But let's say if you see it in a, you know, in a 6-month component, and you see that there is a big gap between the two, then, you know, it's important for then the company to kind of make these big decisions of how they want to contract or kind of expand their resource pool. But then, you know, going into the details of things then is important as well. You can kind of go into, you know, the components of, okay, my team over here is a corporate consultancy team. The corporate consultancy team has 3 FTE, but the demand of them is 1.87. So there's a smaller availability, I guess. There's a smaller gap between the two. Like, you know, if I see on a specific week, I have actually more demand than capacity, so you can see there's a negative. Immediately in red, it shows me the parts where, you know, the demand is higher than the capacity, and that I have to kind of increase the number of staff or number of allocations onto this specific work. But essentially, you know, without kind of spending too much time on this, just by having a simple table like this that compare both components, you can have a lot more of an accurate view of all of this as well. And at the same time, you can then generate graphs as well. And this is where, you know, it becomes very beneficial for your more senior and management to kind of have a look at the results, have a look at the comparison and difference between all the different components that are there. Now that's capacity versus demand. That's a more of a holistic view. I was talking about looking at trends and you know, looking at how you can then improve, and you know, by also looking at some of the trends that have happened in the past, you can have a good idea of that. One thing is to bring in your timesheet component. You know, you can have reports that generically, like, you know, look at the forecasted hours that you plan for your staff and compare them to the actual hours that they've worked in the past. So over here, for example, I can again see that, you know, my forecasted, I've worked for, and I put this in hours, but let me change this to FTE one more time. You know, I've booked my staff on for 3.08, you know, FTE worth of work, but then they'd actually worked 0.32. Now, obviously, this type of dramatic difference is rare, but to kind of push a point across is that the moment you see gaps like that, you know immediately that, you know, your plan is going wrong. You need to change the way you're planning the demand. You need to change the number of staff that you're placing onto this work, and that you have to kind of, you know, make some dramatic changes when it comes to this. And having that gap there, or if it's the opposite, if your booked is a lot lower than the actuals are working, that means you're not allocating enough time or you know, to your staff or to enough staff that's there. So that comparison needs to be made. Now, these reports can be generated very, very easily from your timesheet. Whether you're doing that manually or whether you have a timesheet system, getting that information is quite quick, and you can do that quite easily as well. So I guess, without kind of spending too much time now, I'm going to kind of cover it from there. Those are the main core tips. Obviously, these are very generic tips, and you're going to have to tweak it based on your company's scenario as well. We have, if you are interested in kind of getting those details and having a bit of this plan formulated for you, we are providing it with the company, for free as well, and it's very worthwhile. A lot of companies do help, really do benefit from that. One of our case studies is FTI Consulting, one of our clients based in the UK. FTI Consulting had kind of utilized our software and our solution in order to kind of schedule their 200 resource strong resource pool that they have. And, with all the different configurations and capabilities, they were able to kind of forecast and really plan their stuff a lot better. One of the big core components was visibility. Once you get that visibility and you're scrapping that Excel sheet, which I think a lot of companies, and I'm sure a lot of you are using an Excel spreadsheet, you can essentially kind of get that visibility and that integration there with the rest of your systems that you have. But I recommend, we'll also send you a link of our FTI case study as well, so you can have a read of that. Now, just quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but a bit more about our software. We are, the four components that we focus on is definitely visibility. The forecasting components, you briefly saw the report we had for capacity demand, but we have other components or other reports that really focus on utilization. It focuses on different areas to kind of help you with your efficiency and productivity within your company. And then on the more technical and more company level aspects, it's highly configurable. We deal with companies in in countless different industries. So obviously they work in very different ways, so we configure the system for them in very different ways. And then we also integrate with all of their different components, whether it be the different project management, ERP systems, HR systems in some scenarios as well, and a lot of timesheets as well. So that integration is something that we've really made sure to make quite easy with our open-ended architecture of the tool. Now, some of our clients over here, specifically in the consulting space, we are, we would like to consider ourselves industry leaders. PwC, FTI Consulting, Grant Thornton, your Konica Minoltas, a lot of these consulting firms do utilize our software. Again, look, I'm not going to make this too much of a sales spiel in any way, but if you want to contact us, we will send you through an email. And I guess if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to email us back. I'm more than happy to get on a call with you or get one of our very talented resource management consultants as well who can help you out with that too. So thank you for watching our webinar. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to email us, and hopefully speak to you guys soon. Thank you.